interviewed, negotiated, onboarded, and have fully started an executive level role at a company, all from the comfort of my home office.
Lizette, thank you so much for joining us at Bridges Unite. I'm Deborah Pogorelski. I'm the founder and Chief Passion Officer, and I'm here with Cristina, our Chief Designer Officer. It's a pleasure that you've made the time to join us and to share your expertise and your passion to promote equality, fairness, diversity in the world. So, we love your background. I think you wear so many hats. You're an Afro-Latina, right? So you're covering 3 different minorities. We'd love to cover what are some of those challenges that you've had to overcome in your career in the context of this intersectionality, and if we've made any progress.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Deborah and Cristina, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be part of this conversation. I am so excited about the mission of Bridges Unite, and I could not be a more fierce advocate of the work you are doing, and I am so honored to just be a part of that. The interesting thing, I love this question about being an Afro-Latina and understanding the role that it played throughout my career and challenges. And one of the things that I think we often lose sight of is really understanding the root of intersectionality and culture. And for me, being an Afro-Latina is my superpower. And I very much consider it my superpower. And it doesn't negate the fact that I had to overcome seemingly insurmountable challenges throughout my career. I was born to a single mom in the South Bronx, a first generation Puerto Rican, born on the mainland, first person in my family to go to college, second person to graduate from high school. So yes, there's been, not without its challenges. I think at every stage of my education and my career, I've had to navigate something that is unfamiliar and unknown. It's like walking into a new stage of life at every single point and not knowing what that looks like because you've never had to experience that. And I've been blessed by so many people along the way, from teachers to coaches to mentors, leaders in the industry. But being an Afro-Latina from the Bronx is also what made me, right? Like, it made me who I am, and it gave me the strength and really the aptitude to navigate the unfamiliar and uncomfortable circumstances that I've encountered in my career. And I consider it almost like the heartbeat of my leadership and the core of who I am as an individual. And that's why I call it my superpower. It's why I have really deep and familiar empathy for diverse consumers. It made me a super strong marketer because nobody understands diverse consumers better than an Afro-Latina from the Bronx that speaks 2 languages. You have a different kind of empathy when you come in to read a script, when you're looking at a piece of work on whether or not that's going to work for a specific demographic of people. It's why I can go through normal professional challenges like budget cuts, downsizing, office politics, and it doesn't even bother me because I've been through some of those challenges in my life as a whole, and I know that there's bigger challenges out there. So I'm able to navigate the complexity of just having a corporate career because of who I am and because of what my intersectionality represents in terms of the strength and the resilience that it's given me. And it's also why I know my worth and my values. Like, I was raised by some of the strongest Puerto Rican women I have ever known that instilled in me the value of being a strong Latina, of being proud of who I am, being proud of our heritage. And so I have a sense of security, of self, that comes through in leadership and allows me to walk into a meeting with my swag and to be who I am and to be proud of my authenticity and be very transparent about that instead of trying to hide it. So I say all that to say that while there's been challenges, there are far, far more strengths and far more amazing things that I have tapped into as a result of being a woman, of being Black, and of being a Latina. And when I look at my career, that is truly the crux of my superpower.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing your story. It's very inspirational. And diving deeper into what is the role of companies in promoting diversity, and particularly when it comes to Black employees, because it's more than a statement. what are some of the actionable things that you expect to see moving forward?
Yeah, it's really fascinating, especially us having this conversation during the season and at this time, because I think in early June, when the whole Black Lives Matter movement kind of erupted, we saw companies rushing to make these beautifully crafted statements and put Black boxes on their social. And there was just all of these activities that were happening. Companies you never heard from in the space, all of a sudden were standing up for social justice. And it was so fascinating to me as a marketer and as a marketer of color, by the way, to see all of this activity happening. And I think the role of any company has to extend beyond a piece of social communication.
Yeah.
It even has to extend beyond a D&I tactic or strategy. Like, I think some of those things need to be implemented, statements need to be given, they're important, but for me, that is table stakes. Like, your company should stand to be an anti-racist. Your company should stand up D&I initiatives. But that's just operating. That's that's not actually the end goal. And when we think about what that looks like, and I talked a little bit about this in the Adweek article that I wrote around the actions that companies can really be taking, we have to look at how to systemically embed actions that eliminate institutional bias and systemic racism in the way the company makes money, right? In the everyday operations of how an organization operates, not just in the D&I function, and that's not taking anything away from D&I, but look at how your organization gets revenue and start to think about how you eliminate bias within the operating model of an organization and how it brings money into the company. To me, that is how you really start to dismantle systemic racism above and beyond doing some of the standard things that we should be doing anyway. I think if organizations are just looking at this as like, well, we'll just do diversity recruiting, or we'll just do this one thing, like, it's so much bigger than that. When we think about the responsibility that these organizations have to really end institutional bias in the way they have existed for centuries, honestly. And it's the responsibility of all of us to come together to help do that. I gave some examples. One of them was around committing to hiring, retaining, and promoting diverse talent within organizations. That's like the first step. To me, that's like the easiest thing to do. Two was around committing to understand and reflect audiences, diverse audiences, through really strong work that your organization produces. And this is really important in the advertising industry. And last is really around budgets. Like, let's have the hard conversation about right-sizing allocations to budgets that serve diverse consumers, that embed diversity within the suppliers that you have within your organization. How much money is your team allocating to that? And let's really start to think about the revenue and the operating model of organizations and how we dismantle from the inside out. To me, is critically important.
Thank you, Lizette. I think that those are such valuable ways of approaching this, right? We've seen, to your point, so many companies reacting so fast, but there was really no essence behind it. It's like, what's the fastest thing we can do to jump into the conversation and show our consumers that we're doing something? But when you start going deep into it, really, it's not really fomenting that change you're discussing. For example, when we talked to Cindy Gallup, she called out the campaign that Nike had, and Gallup said, Nike, you don't have anyone on your leadership board. Mm-hmm. So let's start looking inside before we have these executions to the outside, right? So that takes me to the next question, discussing the merging the brands with culture, right? You have a lot of awards in that. You're definitely a very well-known voice, and you have a lot of recognition in that work. So what does this mean right now in the current context that we're going through, considering the changes we're going through as a society, which are not minor if we think of everything we've been discussing, and the global pandemic we are facing, right? Everyone is waking up and really going through, what is my essence right now, and what can I bring into the world?
I love that question, and I'll tell you, there has never been a more important time for this work, for the convergence of brands and culture, because I think we're living in such a critical cultural moment right now. It really is like, you know, it's funny. A couple of weeks ago, I actually reached out to all my industry friends that run multicultural marketing at a variety of client side organizations. And I called them and, you know, I've did that work for a long time. And I told them, hey, this is your time to step on the gas. Like, you guys should be like, let's speed up the fight. Like, this is your moment. You need to keep going. And there's a couple of things that are happening. One, it's the convergence of several different things. African Americans and Latinos are being disproportionately affected by COVID. You know, you look at some of the communities and what's happening within those communities, and they're dying at faster rates, right? Asian Americans are being subjected to blatant prejudice as a result of the pandemic and are dealing with this in their day-to-day lives. And then you layer in Black Lives Matter and what's happening with police brutality, and you're looking at a subset of consumers that are seeking trust, and they're sitting in communities and they're wanting connection. And we're talking about this, those communities represent over $1 trillion of buying power. I've done enough studies on them, I've looked at them, and fiercely loyal to brands that support their communities and who they are and the work that they do. And so now brands need to stand up and figure out how they do the hard work of showing up for these consumers and continue to drive that loyalty. And they have a responsibility to those consumers. These diverse people have been the muse and the aspiration for popular culture forever. You can look across a variety of brands that have built their entire brand purpose and brand positioning on the backs of communities of color. And now I'm saying you have a responsibility back to those same communities for which you use for your higher level aspiration to sell a pair of sneakers, to sell a piece of music, to sell some clothing. And let's think about how you really connect with those communities and give back from where you built your organizations. And by the way, they are seeking that from you. They are seeking brand trust. And this is your moment right now to stand on the right side of history and do the right thing and be loyal to these consumers the way they have been loyal to you for years and years and years. And I hope that we begin to see brands do that above and beyond a tweet, above and beyond a statement or a piece of creative that they've put out. So they're in this for the long term in terms of serving diverse consumers with their messaging and with their brands.
What are your thoughts on brands that the action that they're doing is removing a character, for example, from their iconic brand, or doing something that changes the brand overall, beyond the communication, but more down to the essence?
Yeah, I mean, I think, and we've seen so many examples of that, by the way, several of which I've worked on in the past. So I've been intricately involved in the fabric of some of those very public brands. I go back to like, that's table stakes. Like being an anti-racist is just showing up to the party. Like, what are you doing beyond that? Yes, we should do that. That's the right thing to do. Not upholding, you know, some of these images and things of that sort is a necessary move. And I'm proud of them. It's absolutely the right direction. But that's not the end all be all. We don't applaud things that are table stakes. If we really want to drive systemic change, we really want to evolve the industries that we work in this country as a whole, we have to be willing to put in the work. And it's a much more long-term conversation, much more long-term. This is a moment in time. I think it's critically important. But my hope is that these organizations commit to a long-term focus. They aren't nearly as diverse as they should be. Sure, remove an icon from your packaging. Send me a picture of your board of directors while you're at it. Let's really have the real conversation. Send me a snapshot of your budget so we can see what you're investing in diverse communities and diverse media. Once you remove that graphic from your packaging, there's a much bigger conversation that needs to be had. And I think there's a push that needs to happen that goes above and beyond some of the surface level things that are important. But again, they're just table stakes to show up.
Agree. Brands right now have a huge responsibility now, and it's up to them to see how people see them moving forward. And talking about brands, you worked on the brand side for brands such as Pepsi, Kimberly-Clark, and McDonald's, and now you're switching over to tech. So what are some of the key differences that you see, and how does that compare?
Yeah, I've been like tremendously blessed in my career to work with some really iconic brands. It's been a fantastic ride. And I think for me, the red thread has always been around remaining at the center of culture and at the heartbeat of a cultural conversation. So obviously at Pepsi, and then I worked on all the brands at Kimberly-Clark, Huggies, Kotex, Kleenex. I continue to stay within that because they touch the consumer in a different way in everyday lives. And it was important to me to understand the impact of that, the impact that it could have in the work that I do. Now, when you think about the differences within those organizations, while they are the same in a lot of ways, the difference comes in how the ideas and the programs are manifested. Whether that was me developing a new brand campaign for Huggies, or looking at a piece of innovation for PepsiCo, or creating a connection to consumers in a restaurant at McDonald's, the way they connect with the consumers is very different depending on the actual brands that you're working on. But again, all with the same long-term goal in mind, which is really building brand affinity with consumers. I just think the way that they go about it can be really different. I am super excited about my new chapter in tech and social media, because to me it represents just the pinnacle of connecting with consumers in such an everyday format and getting the feedback back from them and understanding the cultural conversation that is happening. So I can't wait to drive impact in my new role. I think it's going to continue to elevate the work that I've been doing that's really connecting to consumers and, really in a cultural conversation.
Lizette, what was the bridge that helped you be where you're at now? Is there a specific person or moment that changed your path?
This question was so amazing to me because it was a moment, and I'll tell you guys about it. It was March 10th, 1993. And I remember the moment because it was the day I received an acceptance letter. They were still mailing letters back then. I received an acceptance letter to go to boarding school in rural Massachusetts. So I was accepted into this program called A Better Chance, which is a program that helps really talented, diverse students get an opportunity to go to elite private schools. And I had an opportunity to leave the Bronx to go to a school called Brooks School, which is the alma mater of Steve Forbes, full scholarship for 4 years. And so at 14, I packed up my stuff and I moved to North Andover, Massachusetts, where I lived in a dorm. I was one of probably 10 students of color at that school. And I had never spoken to a white person my own age in my entire life until the 9th grade, until my first day at school. And it was probably the hardest experience I ever had. You guys are seeing hundreds of thousands of dollars of education. That is not the girl that showed up the first day from the Bronx at Brooks School. It was very different. And it was so hard because I was so different and I was a teenager and I was growing into adolescence. And then I got dropped at this very affluent school in the middle of nowhere, being one of 10 diverse students, but it's also where I found my voice. I did crew for 4 years. I was a coxswain, super preppy sport. I was president of our diverse students organization. I led the movement in terms of diversity on the campus of that school. And it defined who I became as a person, to be honest. And it defined me and it changed me. And it, the rest is history. I graduated magna cum laude from that school, early acceptance into Columbia University. Like the world was mine, I think, coming out of there. And the truth is, I learned how to navigate white America because of that experience. That experience served me in so many different ways above and beyond education. But it taught me how to speak, how to interact, how to be in different circles and connect with all types of people at a very early age, which put me at an advantage. Even now in my career, I'm very comfortable being in rooms where I'm the only person of color because of the experience I had at a very young age. So when I think about that, I always remember I actually remember the day I got the letter and I held it and I read the letter that said I was being accepted to boarding school and I was leaving the Bronx. And it was just, I knew at 14 that my life was going to change forever. And it did.
Wow, that's amazing. Congratulations. How do you define success?
For me, it's super simple. Success is just being at peace with the decisions that you make in your life. And I think that shows up for different people in different ways. But if you make decisions for your life and you are at peace with those decisions, to me, that is success.
If you could give our community one message, what would that be?
I'm big on vision setting, right? And so I think we need to spend the time and invest the time to define a vision for our lives that is bigger than a title, than a company, than a relationship. Like, what is the vision that you have for your life? And then spend your life investing into the vision that you have. For me, that vision is walking a life in relationship with God and the purpose that He has for me. And I do that every single day. And if I encounter a situation that isn't aligned with that, then it isn't an opportunity for me. But I live an authentic life in pursuit of the vision that God has set for me. And I think that's when you find real peace, and that's when you find real success, because it isn't defined on a title or a corporation or a status or a thing. It's truly defined, and like, it's individualistically yours, and it's authentically yours, and it's on your terms. And I think that's when you find happiness.
I love that, Lizette, especially in the context we're at now. And we mentioned it before. I think each one of us is really redefining what that means, that connection with ourselves, with the universe, with the planet, with our fellow human being. It's really important to take the time right now for some self-love, self-care, and reassess if we're really living our values, right? And if we're comfortable with those values, right?
Absolutely.
So earlier when we started this call, you mentioned amidst a pandemic, you were able to switch jobs. So how did you do it? Is there any tip that you could give our community in regards to this?
Yeah, well, first of all, if you're watching this and you have recently lost your job, I want you to be encouraged. First of all, I said it earlier, but you are not your job, and you are not a title, and you are not a corporation. So I promise you that there's so much more for your life than the season you were just in. And I promise you that something bigger is ahead for you, and just stay encouraged. So I did. I interviewed, negotiated, onboarded, and have fully started an executive level role at a company, all from the comfort of my home office. Never met my boss before. I've never met my team before. And it, the best thing I could say is just the level of preparation that I did was really like a lot. I studied really hard for the interview, the way you would prep for an exam. And I took the time, and I can't say this enough, to do things outside of look for a job. Like, you need to take breaks. Like, I bake, I hung out with my kids. Like, you have to find other ways to define yourself besides looking for a job every day. So my advice is prepare. Do things besides look for a job. That's my biggest advice. And I have a video. If you go to my website, LizetteWilliams.com, I have a whole video because I did a Zoom session on all of the steps I took, so you can get a lot more details there if you want.
That's amazing. Thank you so much.
We'll make sure we share that. Thank you so much.